اجي اخذك؟ حبيبتي طيب انا يا حبيبتي رح اجي اخذك. هلا عمو من الهلال عماله عم بنصك عشان احنا نقدر نيجي ناخذك. حواليكي في ضرب رصاص؟ خذيني يا حبيبتي والله بدي اخذك بس مش بايدي هلا. نحكي بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. برافو عليكي هيك حافظة. ميتين؟ وهم هلا معك بالسيارة؟ وين انت هلا محمية؟
بالسيارة الضباب جنبية.
خليكي يا عمري بالسيارة. أنا حتمني فاتحة الخط معاكي، أتمني أحكي معك، ما بدي أسكر التليفون. تمام؟
We say Israel is committing war crimes, but what are they? The Geneva Conventions form the core of international humanitarian law. It is the holy book of what the West calls as international human rights. The US and allies not only aid and abet a genocide in the making, but also voted against even a humanitarian pause. The US war machine could not even bring itself to pause so that babies may be saved. The West knows how to lecture the East about human rights with a straight face. To this day, 50 different UN Security Council resolutions which are critical of Israel were all vetoed by the usual suspects, US, France, and Britain. So I know, for Israel, Geneva Conventions is as important as my shopping list. But for those of you who still care about human rights, here we go. Number 1. Intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population as such or against individual civilians not taking direct part in hostilities. Number 2. Intentionally directing attacks against civilian objects, that is, objects which are not military objectives. Number 3. Attacking or bombarding by whatever means towns, villages, dwellings, or buildings which are undefended and which are not military objectives. Number 4. Employing weapons, projectiles, and material and methods of warfare which are of a nature to cause superfluous injury or unnecessary suffering, or which are inherently indiscriminate in violation of the international law of armed conflict provided. Number 5. Intentionally directing attacks against buildings, material, medical units, and transport and personnel using the distinctive emblems of the Geneva Conventions in conformity with international law. Number 6. Violence to life and person, in particular, murder of all kinds, mutilation, cruel treatment, and torture. Number 7. Committing outrages upon personal dignity, in particular, humiliating and degrading treatment. Number 8. Intentionally using starvation of civilians as a method of warfare. Number 9. Intentionally directing attacks against buildings dedicated to religion, education, art, science, or charitable purposes, historic monuments, hospitals, and places where the sick and wounded are collected. Number 10. The transfer, directly or indirectly, by the occupying power of parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies, or the deportation or transfer of all or parts of the population of the occupied territory within or outside this territory. Israel is committing war crimes, and those who can't admit that is complicit in this genocide.
When these babies are born prematurely, to sustain their lives, they need to have the same temperature of their mother. This temperature can only be offered in the incubators, which are heated properly and have special light that will protect them from jaundice. And if they need artificial respiration, it will be available in those units. Now, because of shortage of electricity, they have gathered them all and put them on those beds together so that they can have some more temperature. You know, the winter is getting inside now Gaza. It's becoming winter and the weather is becoming colder now. For that reason, without having proper temperature for them, they immediately die. I hope that they will remain alive despite the disaster in which this hospital is passing through. 4 of those babies lost their mothers, and in Shifa Hospital was able to make cesarean sections to their dead mothers to save their lives, and they were saved. Now they have to make it without their mothers and without electricity in the special care baby unit. So, I mean, 4 of them are without their mothers. Can you imagine that?
كل قرايبك ماتوا في جباليا؟
7 نفر.
كم نفر؟
70 نفر.
70 نفر؟
حرقين مساكين. رايح شفتهم هناك طلعتهم تحت الردى مساكين.
لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. أكثر من 70 نفر استشهد في جباليا. الله يرحمهم يا رب. ارتاحوا يا حاج.
حرقت يا أخو، حرقت. شفتهم. مش حرب هذا يا أخو، هذا زلزال، هذا زلزال، هذا دمار. ما بدهم يشتغلوا فينا ولا حاجة، لا شجر ولا حجر ولا مدرسة ولا عيادة ولا مستشفى ولا سوق ولا حاجة. فيش بيئة، فيش ناس. أرض محروقة، أرض محروقة. فيش نتفة تطلع. وين يومين وأنا قاعد بنام.
يومين وأنت قاعد بتقلب في الرمل؟
في الحجر. يومين بنطلع فيهم مساكين.
How many civilians have been killed in Gaza, from what you know?
Who gives a shit?
Okay, but don't you feel like, for example, children?
Children grow up to be Arabs.
את יודעת כמה חפים מפשע נהרגו בעזה?
טוב, אז כנראה שנעצור.
את לא רוצה לענות על זה?
תודה.
אוקיי, אפשר לשאול למה?
כי אני לא חושבת שיש מישהו שהוא חף פשע שם. צר.
את יודעת כמה חפים מפשע נהרגו בעזה?
לא, זה גם לא מעניין אותי.
לא? למה?
לא מעניין אותי, אני...
It is when darkness prevails that I sit by the window to look past all those electricity-free houses, smell the sweet sounds of a calm Gaza night, feel the fresh air going straight to my heart, and think of you, of me, of Palestine, of the crack, of the blank wall, of you, of Mama, of you, of my history class, of you, of God, of Palestine, of our incomplete story. I enjoy bringing to my mind your tender voice narrating the story of Daesh. I still remember how I cheerfully beamed when you told me that I and Thair are so much alike, that he has my wild eyes and I his sheepish smile. I haven't yet known who he is or where in life he stands, but I believe I had always trusted your heroes. I can never forget how your dazzling eyes had brightened when you recalled him planting some olive seedlings in the backyard of the orphanage. God bless the smile on your face. God bless the seeds under the ground. I can never forget how you looked me in the eyes and said, he's a boy who lost his whole family to death, but never lost faith in life. I want you to be as strong. Baba, do you remember when I asked you if he was strong enough to wrestle an Israeli soldier? You grinned. You always did. But you didn't answer me. You wanted me to figure things out on my own.
نزحنا من غزة يعني بعد الحرب ب4 أيام. طلبوا منا اليهود قالوا لنا انزحوا للجنوب لأنه الشمال منطقة غير آمنة. فسمعنا ونزحنا زي ما الناس نزحت، كل غزة نزحت، دمرت بيوتنا، اتدمرنا، صار القصف فوق روسنا، شردنا يعني بغير وعي. طلعنا من الدور، خلونا نمسك أولادنا الصغار ونشرد، ما أخذنا معنا أي حاجة، لا ملابس لا أكل لا أي شيء. اجينا على الجنوب لقينا مجاعات. إيش مجاعات لا توصف، يعني الإنسان لقينا غلا، لقينا أسعار، لقينا أمراض، كتر من الناس متكدسة، كل إشي من الغلا مش قادرين نجيبوا لأولادنا. ضلوا أولادنا، إجا البرد، إجا هاي رجع يجي علينا كمان صيف، الصيف الحر يعني لا يوصف، يعني قاعدين طول النهار صغار بيعيطوا من الشوق، مش عارفين إيش نعمل فيهم. صرنا ناخذهم ونحطهم في البحر ونطلعهم، فيش مية، عانينا من المية معاناة كبيرة، يعني بنضل من 5 أيام ما فيش مية حتى للشرب مش ملاقينها.
حابب أحكي لكم، راحت علينا السنة الدراسية في قطاع غزة عام 2023 و24 أننا استفدنا أعلى الدرجات في الصبر والقوة والتحدي والثبات، أننا نلنا شرف الدفاع عن الوطن وعن كرامة الأمة الإسلامية. ومعظم طلاب غزة قد أصبحوا شهداء أو مصابين، وباقي الأطفال يجمعون الحطب وتعبئة المياه. حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل.
Than 80% of Gaza's population has been displaced and the majority of its buildings destroyed. A reality which has taken its own toll on the well-being of children.
What about the emotional wounds?
How can you measure that? I can't measure my own. How do you be an orphan and watching your family, melted in front of you and shredded in front of you? How do you fix that? Ever fix that?
In fact, so many Palestinian children have had family members killed that doctors created a shorthand term, WCNSF, Wounded Child, No Surviving Family.
We're very proud and honored to be able to bring...
Last month, speaking in Washington, D.C., other American doctors echoed Dr. Perlmutter's calls for help.
We've described it as a catastrophe, a nightmare, a hell on earth. It's all of these and worse.
We didn't even have hand sanitizer or alcohol or soap most of the time.
And while we're there, we're listening to, aid is getting in. We're taking care of civilians. They're not being targeted, and yet we're witnessing a completely different story.
For dozens of miles, we saw 18-wheelers parked bumper to bumper, engines off outside of Gaza. Food or health care could not get in.
How many kids are in danger of starvation in Gaza?
All of them. Absolutely all of them.
United Nations experts have accused Israel of carrying out a targeted starvation campaign.
احنا قاعدين هنا بنغضب مش عارفين ايش نسوي. اشتقنا للمدارس، اشتقنا للملاعب، فيش حاجة. الملاعب مليانات خيام، محروقات، دورنا تفجرت، وهينا قاعدين بين الرطم هذا مش عارفين ايش نسوي بالمرة. بتقف بدك تعيط، بتقف فوق دار عالية بتشوف الدمار، تقدرش تستحمل، يعني بدك تعيط. دارك كنت تعمل فيها بنيتها بايديك، راحت بغمضة عين، مش عارفين ايش نسوي. يعني قاعدين في الخيام مرمطة وقصص، مش قادرين، وحتى الخيمة عندها هالت علينا. البحر سحبنا أكتر من مرة وغرقنا في الخيام. الخيمة راحت في البحر. البحر بيتمد ومأساة. فيش مصاري انك تتأجر دار. الدار قديش تتأجرها؟ كانت قبل تتأجرها بمصاري خفيفة، الحين لا في قبضات ولا في شغل تشتغله ولا في اشي تسويه في الحرب. الحين انت قاعد على توكيل ربنا. احنا ايش ذنبنا كأطفال؟ احنا زي ما بيقولوا احنا لسه طالعين من البيضة.
You in Gaza?
End of April for the first couple weeks of May.
Dr. Mark Perlmutter, an orthopedic surgeon from North Carolina and vice president of the International College of Surgeons, volunteered in Gaza.
So, of all the disaster zones you've seen, how does Gaza compare?
All of the disasters I've seen combined, 40 mission trips, 30 years, ground zero, earthquakes, all of that combined doesn't equal the level of carnage that I saw against civilians in just my first week in Gaza.
And when you say civilians, is it mostly children?
Almost exclusively children. I've never seen that before. Never seen that. I've seen more incinerated children than I've ever seen in my entire life combined. I've seen more shredded children in just the first week.
Shredded?
Shredded.
What do you mean?
Missing body parts, being crushed by buildings, the greatest majority, or bomb explosions, the next greatest majority. We've taken shrapnel as big as my thumb out of 8-year-olds, and then there's sniper bullets. I have children that were shot twice.
Wait, you're saying that children in Gaza are being shot by snipers?
Definitively. I have 2 children that I have photographs of that were shot so perfectly in the chest I couldn't put my stethoscope over their heart more accurately, and directly on the side of the head in the same child. No toddler gets shot twice by mistake by the world's best sniper, and they're dead center shots.
In fact, more than 20 doctors recently in Gaza also told Sunday morning about gunshot wounds to children. One American doctor told us he even reviewed CT scans to confirm what he saw because he, quote, didn't believe that this many children could be admitted to a single hospital with gunshot wounds to the head. Some shootings have been captured on video.
عشان هيك انا عظمي راح اتفتفت خلص تعبت عن جد على الاخر وبالاخر راح هيك بالساهل راح لربه الحمد لله.
حوالي 5 حالات وفاة تم تسجيلها في مجمع ناصر الطبي بسبب البرودة. صراحة الأعراض التي يأتي بها الطفل متنوعة، ولكن أكثر أطفال عرضة لهذه النوبة البرد الأطفال حديثي الولادة، يعني من أول شهر أو ثاني شهر.
كان عمره 35 يوم، فما كانش فيه ولا إشي، يعني توفى من البرد. لو بعرف إن البرد كمان بده يقتله هيك كان أنا دفيته أكتر من ما كان متدفي كمان. لما المطر تمطر علينا الخيمة بتغرق، الأواعي فيش، لما يغرق الأواعي خلص عوضنا على الله، بنغطيهم بالحرامات لحد ما ينشف، تيجي الشمس، تروح الموجة ويجي الشمس. إيش بدنا نعمل؟
من أحد أدوات العلاج لهؤلاء الأطفال هو أنه يكون مكان مغلق ويتم تهيئة الجو المحيط به أنه يكون دافئ. ومن أحد تدفئة المحيط اللي هو هذا الجهاز الهوت وورم أو جهاز التدفئة.
All your armies, all your fighters, all your tanks, and all your soldiers against the boy, holding a stone, standing there, all alone. In his eyes, I see the sun. In his smile,
Write my name on my leg, Mama. Use the black permanent marker with the ink that doesn't bleed if it gets wet, the one that doesn't melt if it's exposed to heat. Write my name on my leg, Mama. Make the lines thick and clear, and add your special flourishes so I can take comfort in seeing my mama's handwriting when I go to sleep. Write my name on my leg, Mama, on the legs of my sisters and brothers. This way we will belong together. This way we will be known as your children. Write my name on my leg, Mama, and please write your name and Baba's name on your legs too, so we will be remembered as a family. Write my name on my leg, Mama. Don't add any numbers, like when I was born or the address of our home. I don't want the world to list me as a number. I have a name, and I'm not a number. Write my name on my leg, Mama. When the bomb hits our house, when the walls crush our skulls and bones, our legs will tell our story, how there was nowhere for us to run.
There are millions of tons of rubble. Some areas have been bombed so badly there are no trees left. You see scattered tents with children, often very emaciated now after 15 months of this sort of siege. We're thinking around 17,000 children have lost their families, are unaccompanied. They're coming back to a completely decimated healthcare system where I think less than half of all hospitals are even partially functioning. No electricity, no fuel. We're not able to run generators. We're not able to run intensive care facilities for children. Some children will never go back to school. All the schools have been destroyed. So if the ceasefire does hold, and this is what we are calling for, deaths may stop from bombardment, but children will continue to die from malnutrition, from lack of water, lack of vaccines. There is very little to go back to at the moment.
And who's going to look after these children if they're, 17,000 orphans? Who's going to look after these kids? Where will they look after them? Will they find shelter anywhere?
It's likely that these 17,000 is a gross underestimate. There are children who've been taken in by extended families. We've seen in our clinic young girls and boys coming in age 14 and 15 carrying their 2 or 3-year-old brothers, and they are now the head of the child-headed households. They're children who are being looked at by members of the community. But what's happened is the entire protection system is broken down, and this is where agencies like Save the Children try and step in to provide stability and security and child-friendly and child-welcoming spaces for children like this. I think one of the things that struck me most visibly as a doctor in this context is that every child that comes into our clinics, whether they're malnourished, whether they're dehydrated or injured, they have a look of abject, of dullness, of apathy,
detachment.
Of the last 15 months, detachment of the last 15 months of the whole, some of them for the whole of their lives, taken away. And so the psychological trauma done to these children and their families will be huge.
And presumably there are still many, many children buried under the rubble.
Figures that we have at the moment are distorted, of course, and amplified by so much of the chaos and the noise and the war. But we're quite clear there's children who will never be reunited with their parents and children who will never be found.
Before the war started, like many of you, I lived a regular life. But soon after the war started and we started to see the images of slaughtered children, we started to see this very regularly. And I had sleepless nights and I couldn't function during the day because my mind was always occupied with what was going on in Gaza. I got to the stage where I decided, if not me, then who? And once I arrived here and I saw the effect that one could have in terms of helping people, it was very difficult to walk away from that. I saw a lot of children and a lot of women. Oftentimes schools were hit and the majority of the victims would be women and children. I've been in Gaza for close to 7 months now on 3 different missions. All in all, across all of my missions, close to 7 months, I think I performed close to 1,000 procedures, and we've definitely seen thousands of patients. In the height of the war, when we were completely overwhelmed with injuries, we would operate from 9 a.m. all the way till 4 or 5 a.m. the following day. I can tell you that there is a sea of limbless children and adults. You have patients that come in with head injuries, eye injuries, maxillofacial injuries, nerve injuries, vascular injuries, orthopedic injuries, chest injuries, abdominal injuries, pelvic injuries, everything from head to toe. We have a huge shortage in supplies, in medicines, in medical equipment, including diagnostic equipment. You have a shortage in specialists, either because they were forced to flee, or because they were killed, or because they were imprisoned. It's very a heavy burden on any healthcare facility, let alone one that was bombed and directly attacked. It's very difficult to manage the emotional burden that being in here creates. But you have to remember that this is a price you must pay to help your brothers and sisters who are in need. Whatever you might feel, they feel 1,000 times more. Ultimately, it's their loss, their family that have been killed, it's their injury. Their homes have been wrecked. They're the ones being starved. I will never forget the time I met a young man who was caught in an explosive injury in the European hospital. He was going to have surgery with the eye surgeons. And right before my eyes, when I was there standing with him, the ophthalmologist, I told him that he'd lost his eye. And his immediate reaction was, Allah, give me reward in my calamity and give me something better than this to follow. And right before my very eyes, I saw the spirit of Gaza. That was Gaza.
If God exists, why are their children dying?
So if God does not exist, why do they still? That's a stupid question. Who owns this universe? God. So if he decides to burn it to the ground, who has the ability to complain or object? No one. If I take $100 bill and I burn it, nobody can say, what are you doing? This is mine. It's none of your business. We believe that Allah is fair and just. He would not do something without a legitimate, wise reason. But we are unable to see that because we're so limited in our knowledge and our comprehension. It's like a 7-year-old who's the doctor says we have to operate to take his appendix or he'll die. He looks at his father and says, Dad, the guy is gonna cut me up. He says, it's okay, son, it's gonna be fine. Now the son doesn't see the wisdom of it, but the father does. And Allah has the highest example. Allah Azza wa Jal, children, not because He loves them. There is a bigger reason and wisdom and benefit from that. Without darkness, we would not appreciate the light. Without illness, we would not appreciate health. Without poverty, we would not appreciate wealth, and so on. You only look at the negatives and you don't see the positive. Why do you say why Allah gave us sight, hearing, health, wealth, prosperity, a ceiling over our heads, food on our table, and the likes? You only look at the bad things that you don't see the benefit and the wisdom from, which Satan is controlling.
Amir Al-Hilo, 5 years old. Yahya Al-Akkad, 5 years old. Sally Taher, 4 years old. Musk Al-Hilo, 4 years old. Juri Yasin, 4 years old. Abdul Aziz Al-Hilo, 4 years old. Marwan Abu Lebedeh, 4 years old. Noura Radwan, 3 years old. Laura Al-Hilu, 3 years old. Hamza Aliwa, 3 years old. Muhammad Mu'taz Ubaid Yassin, 3 years old. Amir Tahir, 3 years old.
Karam Eid, 2 years old. Anas Skeik, 1 years old. Salma Muhammad Ali, 1 years old. Jihad Mhaysin, 1 years old. Jamal Eid, 1 years old. Siraj Jawad Ali, 1 years old. Iyad Mhaysin, 1 years old. Ubaida Abu Mailig, 1 years old. Abdul Hamid Ashur, 5 years old. Jamil Abu Hayya, 5 years old.
Gaza has become a graveyard for children. It's a living hell for everyone else. On average, 420 children in Gaza have been reportedly killed or injured every day. 420.
Violence being perpetrated against children extends beyond the Gaza Strip. In the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, at least 37 children have reportedly been killed. And of course, more than 30 Israeli children have reportedly been killed, while at least 20 children remain hostage in the Gaza Strip, their fates unknown.
More than 1 million children of Gaza have a critical water crisis. Gaza's water production now, its capacity is at 5%. So child deaths to dehydration, particularly infant deaths to dehydration, are a growing threat.
In addition to the water problem, some children, some infants are on ventilators. These children can't afford a couple of minutes without electricity because that means that they don't have the oxygen that they need to breathe. We're talking about children witnessing their parents, their families, their sisters and brothers being killed in front of them. These are kids, children who lost their dreams, lost their futures.
As if this wasn't enough, children in both Israel and the state of Palestine are experiencing terrible trauma, the consequences of which could last a lifetime. Whether they are young people attending a music festival or children going about their daily lives in Gaza, they all deserve peace. Children do not start conflicts, and they are powerless to stop them.
When I left Gaza just a few days and weeks ago, the people were being crushed to death waiting for food, for flour, and children have now started freezing to death because they don't have enough shelter items. This is the situation with UNRWA on the ground. This is the situation with the largest humanitarian organization doing everything they can with the rest of the United Nations.
Can anyone take over?
No.
Right,
It's
no one
as
can do
simple as
that.
that. And
Okay.
you can't imagine if it's this bad now, how awful will it be in a few weeks or in a few months if they cease to operate working with UNRWA?
Is this genocide?
I'm not a legal expert. That's not for me to be able to say, but I can tell you what I see. We see children being killed every day. We see people without food. We see people without access to clean water on a daily basis. Disease is spreading. We saw polio return. That was eradicated after 25 years. It's endless. The horrors are endless.
I have to put to you what the Israelis say to us, which is that Hamas is using hospitals as shelter. Have you seen, or do you have any evidence that that is the case?
We have heard these accusations continuously throughout the war, that schools and hospitals are being used for military reasons. We don't have the evidence of this. We have the accusations. What we do know and what we are certain of is that children and families are sheltering in these facilities. We do know that patients are going to these hospitals for treatment, that doctors are being detained, that doctors are being killed while they are working, and that is against international humanitarian law.
And Israel is saying, or at least indicating, that they could in some way start shifting aid into the Strip to where it's needed. Does that sound in any way credible to you?
No.
Why?
It does not. It's a complete risk to the population on top of what they're already facing. It would be unacceptable for anyone but the humanitarians on the ground. They're a party of the conflict. We cannot have a party of the conflict responsible for the humanitarian response for 2 million people. Women, children, they're dying every day now because they don't have the simple items that they need, the medicine, the food, the shelter. This
Right.
needs to be run by the United Nations. This is the responsibility and the mandate of the international community, and that is what we need to continue to be allowed to do.
Gaza is the real-world embodiment of hell on earth for its million children, and it is getting worse day by day as we see horrific impact of daily airstrikes and military operations on Palestinian children. Let me try and share what that looks like through one specific child, a 7-year-old girl who I met very recently, Kamar. Okay, during an attack where she was living in Jabalia camp, Kamar was struck in the foot. The only hospital she could be taken to, given the hostilities, was a maternity hospital. That was then under siege for 20 days, by which time the shrapnel in Kamar's foot had turned to an infection. Because this little girl could not be moved, and because the hospital did not have the capacity to deal with the trauma cases that it was faced, doctors had to amputate Kamar's leg. Now, in any vaguely normal situation, this little girl's leg would never have been amputated. Kamar, her mother, and her sister, who was also injured, were then forced to evacuate on foot. And so a 7-year-old girl with a newly amputated leg was pushed from north to south. They now live in a ripped tent surrounded by stagnant water and other families enduring similar tragedies. Kamar is, of course, deeply traumatised. Regular sounds of bombings and raids only add to that, and there are no prosthetics in Gaza. As heartbreaking as it is, it's not unique, and right now it is being repeated. If this level of horror doesn't stir our humanity and drive us to act, whatever will.
Since the 7th of October, we face extermination, killing, bombing falling over our heads. All of this of front of the world. They lie to the world that they kill the parties, but they kill the people of Gaza, their dreams and their future. Kids of Gaza run out of death once and once. We come to Al-Shifa hospital to keep us from bombing. We suddenly run out of death more after bombing the hospital. The occupation is starving us. We don't find water, food, and we drink from the unusable water. We come now to shout and invite you to protect us. We want to live, we want peace, we want to judge the killers of children. We want medicine, food and education. And we want to live as the other children live.
The reason we are seeing a difference of treatment of the people of Gaza and, for example, the people of Ukraine. By the way, I absolutely support the UK's actions and solidarity with Ukraine. The reason for the difference in treatment, well, let's just say if there was 45,000 blue-eyed, blonde-haired Europeans that were being killed, this ceasefire would have materialised months ago. It is just racism. Mm-hmm. And we should just call it a spade a spade. The difficulty is that it's so blatant, it's so open, it's no longer just subtly institutionalized. You've got at least 25 million Muslims in Europe. The anger and frustration that they're feeling at the double standard and hypocrisy of their own governments, they are European Muslims, is going to cause long-term division, is just the ammunition that extremists need in order to create their propaganda.
بسكوت ب3 أشياء. هاي البسكوت 12 سنة نازح من غزة من شيخ رضوان، دارنا انهدت وانقصفت، وببيع شوكولاتات وبصرف على أهلنا وأخواتي. يلا بشكل علبة الكمامات.
أرجع أدرس، نفسي ألعب، نفسي أرسم، نفسي ألعب مع الأطفال زي البلاد اللي برا بدرسوا، بيلعبوا، بيرسموا اللي بدهم إياه بيعملوه. إحنا في حرب، عايشين في حرب، بنصحى على قصف، بننام على قصف صواريخ. نازح من غزة، فبطلع من الصبحيات عشان أوفر مصروف العيلة كمان، أجيب لأهلي مصاري نصرف على حالنا، يعني نمشي حالنا نسلك حالنا في الأيام الصعبة. ده نازح بخيمة زي ما عارفين الوضع في رفح صعب كتير، والغلا كتير عندنا في رفح والأسعار غالية.
Well, the first time we went in, we travelled via Cairo through the Sinai Desert and crossed at Rafah. And we were in the UN convoy, and there was no restriction really on what you could take. You could take whatever you could get into your minibus. So we managed to take 25 suitcases with us in the march full of medical equipment. And obviously we had colleagues inside who told us what they were short of. So it was almost, you know, a perfect sort of scenario for us in that we turned up with everything that they needed and extra hands. In August, we travelled through Israel and we crossed at Kerem Shalom, which is controlled by COGAT, who are the Commission for Activities in the Territories, so basically Israel. And they had restricted lots of things, including the number of people that could enter. So in March, we were in a convoy of 19 vans with major NGOs and minor charities. There were so many doctors and nurses. In August, Graham and I were the only two surgeons on the coach. There were only 20 seats on the coach. Only 5 of them went to emergency medical teams. All of us could only take one bag in, and it had to weigh 23 kilos. And we were told that we had to take our own food for a month.
In your bag?
Yes.
Plus your supplies?
Yes.
And did you have to bring your own water as well?
You had to take your own water for 3 days. That was the advice.
So what medical equipment could you take?
Well, I packed a very small kit. I think from the March trip I knew the surgery I needed to do. I had a friend who had left NASA who told me that, you know, what kit they didn't have. My theatre sister at Thomas's packed me a very small set of instruments, and I went in with a few disposable bits and pieces, and yeah, we got by.
Biden told us that this is exactly the same as the proposal he put forward months and months ago. Therefore, why didn't we get to a deal until now? And we know why. Netanyahu knew that he could lead the Biden administration around by the nose, and then a new president comes in. And I want to draw a distinction here. I'm not saying that Netanyahu fears that President Trump will be the one to stand up for international law, for Palestinian rights, for ending apartheid and occupation. The issue here is, could Netanyahu be guaranteed that Trump would align with Netanyahu's personal political needs? And that's what he feared. He feared that Trump is unpredictable and could do things which would upset Netanyahu's political longevity, and therefore he had to factor that in. Assuming the deal moves forward, is formalized, finalized, and starts to be implemented, we have a number of issues where the Israeli military have to redeploy to. Movement of Palestinians inside Gaza, especially to the north, as destroyed as that north is, the area that Israel has been trying to depopulate, the area that many in the Israeli government look to resettle. The provision of humanitarian assistance and the Palestinians who will be released from Israeli prisons in exchange for the Israelis who are being held and released from Gaza. All of those things are potential landmines. The problem all along, why are we even here talking about this 16 months later? Why are we still talking about an occupation? Why is the International Court of Justice calling this an apartheid regime? Is that Israel is never held accountable. And if that is what happens in the implementation, we won't even get to the end of phase 1. Liberation struggles are a marathon. Hope matters if one is to stay the course in that marathon. In political struggles, you notch up wins that you know are fragile, that you know can be reversed. But when you notch up some small success, and let's not underplay the significance of if the bombing stops, now, this is plausibly a genocide. That is A moment where one needs to thicken the very thin layer of ice on which this ceasefire will be skating. And you do everything to thicken that, but you know that the ice could be smashed. But one comes out of this knowing that an unprecedented movement has been built. And so one goes into the next period with a much clearer sense of where one's allies are, where one can build, and how one needs to rebuild.